but overall I think it was a pretty decent buff.
Yeah, I agree.
You want to go Cogmon really Malphite after this? Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I haven't seen Ken in a while now, and this will probably mean we start to see him once again.
Yeah, I've seen him a couple times. You want to go over Cogmon Malphite?
Well, I don't really know those characters quite as much. Their changes don't seem huge. The Caustic Spittle for Kog'Maw has been remade. Now grants a passive 10 to 30% attack speed increase, and his active deals 60 to 260 damage, and reduces the armor by 5 to 25 seconds. Reduces the armor by 5 to 25 for 4 seconds, and all that's all dependent on the rank. So I don't know what that represents compared to how he used to be. Have you played Cog?
A little bit. It used to provide, I think, the passive used to provide armor penetration. So now he's able to get more attacks off, and it works a little better with his Bio Arcane Barrage, which allows him to attack from the longer range.
Right.
And they reduce the cooldown on that as well. So combining that with the Void Ooze cooldown reduced, which allows him to slow them, he's been able to be a much more aggressive champion.
Yeah, so it sounds a lot like these buffs are going to help him if you're going with sort of an attack damage build, which I don't think many people were doing. They were playing him almost exclusively as a caster.
Yeah, and I think now it'll be a little different. Well, and Malphite has a pretty big buff.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty big. So you want to start this one off?
Okay, well, the Seismic Shard, that is where he throws something at someone, does damage, and slows them down. The cooldown's been reduced to 10 seconds from 12, which is pretty significant. Now, the duration of the slow has been reduced to 4 seconds from 5, but that's still a pretty long slow, I find. And they've also made it considerably cheaper, so you can probably expect a lot more spam of that in the laning phase, which it was always incredibly annoying. So that's, I think, a nice change from Malphite.
I agree. I've seen more Malphite since this buff too. A lot more. So Brutal Strikes is the next ability, and they changed the active effect to increase his armor and damage by 20 to 40% instead of increasing his damage by 30 to 70%.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's pretty significant, but it makes him more tanky.
Mm-hmm.
And the cooldown was reduced by 16 seconds from 20, so that's pretty significant as well. And they fixed a bug, and the passive cleave percent was increased to 30 to 62% from 30 to 50%. And the cleave passive will no longer activate while hitting towers. And next up we have his Ground Slam ability, and the mana cost reduced to 60 at all ranks from 60 to 100. Also pretty significant. Updated the tooltip. Unstoppable Force is now unstoppable and cannot be interrupted by disables.
That's probably the best single line in the patch notes ever. Unstoppable Force is now unstoppable.
Yeah, seriously, it's like, thank you for making the name true.
Yeah, I guess it would be pretty retarded if you use that and then, I don't know, Tarek threw a stun at you, and then halfway to your target you got stunned.
Rise snares you, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, that would be really ridiculous. So this seems like more like a bug fix, but an important one.
Agreed. So, Granite Shield is his passive, and now recharges after 8 seconds instead of 10.
Wow.
The shield will now automatically restore to full after 8 seconds of not being hit. Previously, would not replenish until a new shield activated.
See, I wondered about that.
That is huge.
I've never been a big Malphite player, and I assumed it would replenish itself after, 10 seconds or whatever. That's ridiculous that it wouldn't.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. So, and then just a couple bugs and updated the new recommended items.
So he's been made much more tanky. I like that.
Yeah, he's been buffed pretty significantly. Nidalee, whatever. Nunu, base attack speed increase, pretty decent, pretty high increase there. Pantheon, nothing. Poppy, Devastating Blow now cannot be dodged. Nasus, Siphoning Strike now cannot be dodged. Rise, fixed a bug where Spell Flux was doing less AoE damage than intended when used in combination with his Arcane Mastery ability. So just a bug fix. Shaco, Deceive, cooldown increased by 1 second, duration decreased by 0.5 seconds. Pretty significant. They're relatively significant there. Hallucinate, cooldown increased by about 10 or so, 20, and then duration reduced from 18 to 30. Guardian Angel no longer revives the clone, although will apply the passive particle. So it looks like he has it, but it won't work, I think, is what that's saying. And his passive bonus damage reduced to 20% from 25%. Two Shiv poison no longer blinds the target, and Jack in the Box will now break stealth upon cast.
See, this all seems pretty insane to me. I know Shaco was a good character, but at least at the higher levels of play, I don't think he's someone who like runs away with the game. And these are some hardcore nerfs.
Yeah, I agree. Those are some pretty big ones. All of them combined is pretty significant.
The Jack in the Box nerf by itself is huge, because that used to be his opener. You'd deceive in, drop a Jack in the Box, and then open, and then so you'd hit them, then they'd get feared, and then you'd hit them some more.
Exactly.
Just that by itself is going to be a radical change to the champion, and then they're comboing it with everything else. I'm willing to bet he's going to need to be buffed next patch, or soon anyway.
He's also not been banned since this buff or debuff.
I bet.
So we're going to move on to Shen. His feint duration increased to 2.5 seconds from 1.5. Meh. Next up, Stand United no longer shield Shen, which is pretty significant.
Now, Shen is a very strong hero. I really like him. But that's pretty huge.
Yeah, I agree. And next up, Soraka. No one cares. No, her Star Call mana cost reduced to 40 to 80 from 42 to 90. Meh, about 2 per level. Astral Blessing mana cost increased to 90 to 170 from 80 to 160. So that's a debuff. Infuse will now infuse half of the mana value to the target and half of the value to Soraka. Soraka will get the full benefit of Infuse when she casts it on herself.
These basically feel like tweaks more than anything else. The change to Infuse is a little weird, but I guess it guarantees that Soraka can keep her mana up more reliably.
Yeah. That's weird, though. Okay, Vladimir. Transfusion cast range reduced to 600 from 650. Tides of Blood buff duration increased to 10 from 8, which is relatively significant. And the cast range increased on Tides of Blood by 50 to 620. So, most people haven't really said anything about the decreased range. They're like, meh, he's still overpowered. I don't really think so. I think the range reduced is pretty significant, and now he has to basically get in there a lot closer to do what he needs to do with transfusion.
Right, but the Tides of Blood got buffed, so I don't know.
Yeah. Later in the game, that's actually a lot more useful now. It's much better.
Oh, good. Then I really like the next change, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, elixirs will now activate immediately if purchased when your inventory is full. And what's great about this is there was a stupid situation in a long game when you had lots of money but you've already bought all your items and your slots are full. What people used to do is sell their boots, buy elixirs, drink them, buy like 3 of them and drink them one after another, and then buy their boots back, which is kind of a ridiculous thing to do. So now, if your inventory is full, you buy an elixir, it gets used instantly, and I think that's smart.
Agreed. I like that one a lot. Mm-hmm. So you can go over the next one too.
Okay, sure. Oh, yes. So a recent patch changed Cleanse, gave it a serious nerf where it didn't work with as many things as before. Basically, it would only remove pure CC like a stun or something like that.
Yep.
And now they've re-added its ability to remove Silence and Blind, which I think is really important because they basically nerfed Cleanse to where it's not very useful at all. So now it still doesn't get rid of damage over time effects and a few other little things, but it still reliably gets rid of CC, which I like because I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one thing I read somewhere about League of Legends that somewhere I read it, either online in a review or something, that League of Legends, they're trying to make the game faster and not so long, and when they removed the buff on Cleanse, or then they debuffed Cleanse, they made the game so fast. And I think that's kind of what they don't want Cleanse to be overused to the point where crowd control is no longer going to end the game. I think they kind of want it so that crowd control is really useful, and something as simple as a summoner ability can't negate Ashe's ultimate or something like that, even though it does negate Ashe's ultimate, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and they've done a lot of decisions like that, way back when the game was first released, or maybe even when it was still in beta. They significantly nerfed the health on items and a few things like that, because they don't want to end up in these places where people are unkillable and things don't move. So I understand they don't want Cleanse to be all powerful and super defensive, and at the same time everyone is taking Cleanse because it was so good. But I think this is a nice balance where it is now. I mean, cleanse has got to do something. I would say
I agree.
If they need to nerf cleanse some more, just increase its cooldown, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fine where it is now.
Well, I like it, but that's because I use it.
So we're going to move on to the more important ones in the general, and champions will now use the higher of their bonus attack damage or 40% of their AP when dealing bonus damage to towers.
Big fan of this change.
Yes.
A lot of games, when you get to the late phase, seem to revolve around physical DPS champions and the fact that they can kill a tower in 5 to 10 seconds and just do crazy tower dives. And so this helps to bring spellcasters up to par, sort of late game in that role.
I agree. I thoroughly enjoy this one, and along with the next one, improve loading time by up to 25%. So that's very good.
Yeah, one of the things that got me when I started playing League of Legends, I just finished playing Fallout 3 my first time, and Fallout 3 is notable in my mind for having virtually no load times. I mean, you're playing in a freaking entire state, basically. It's so huge, and there's no load times. And then I load League of Legends, which is this simple little thing, having just come from Dota. And, like, the first game, it takes, like, 2 minutes to load, because some jackass has got some 286 running in the background, and I just nearly died. I couldn't believe it, so load time improvements are good.
Sweetness. Alright, so I think that's about it for the patch notes.
I think
and that took quite a while, so let's just move right into Free this week.
Sure. Go ahead.
Alright, well, I'm going to be covering Teemo. Free this week champions are Malphite after his buff, Master Yi, Morgana, Ryze, Singed, Severe, Taric, Teemo, Shen, and Malzahar. I'm going to be covering Teemo, a ranged DPS. He's a champion I've used a lot before, so I know a fair amount about him. I like to build him DPS, ranged DPS like it says. There are other ways to build him, such as hybrid or AP, but ranged DPS is one of my favorite ways. Depending on who the champions that you're facing are, I usually like to get a Doran shield first to keep him laning for a little longer. Some people like Doran's blade. That's okay, but he tends to take a lot of damage, and when you need that HP back, it's pretty difficult to get it when you're at low HP. Excuse me. Another item people start with is the Vampiric Scepter, and that's also it's okay. I don't really love it, but works. And we'll go over his abilities. His passive, if he stands there for I think 3 seconds, he becomes invisible, and when he breaks his stealth, he gains an attack speed bonus for like 3 seconds. So that's good for him to ambush people, but it doesn't work that often because he has to stand still. We talked about that in our previous podcast in Invis Champs. He's not really considered an invisible champ, and his Q is Blinding Shot, where he hits them with that magic damage based single target nuke and blinds them for like 2 seconds, I believe. And his W ability is Move Quick. If he's hit by a champion or a tower, it turns the ability off, and it increases his movement speed by like 20 to 40% or something like that. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. His E ability is his Poison. Applies poison for 4 seconds, and upon hitting them, it applies the poison. And that's good. It's basically how he deals most of his damage and gets a lot of his kills, along with his ultimate, which is the Mushroom. Anyone who doesn't know this, you have not been playing the game long enough. Deals damage over time, slows you down. It's annoying as fuck. They're everywhere. Anytime you're trying to go back and there's a team, you're going to hit a Mushroom and die. And that's pretty much how it goes. Anyway, back to the build. I like to build in DPS. Although I start with Doran Shield, I like to get usually boots next, attack speed boots. Although no one likes them, they're pretty okay on Teemo. And then you just go for standard DPS items, Infinity Edge, etc., etc. Bloodthirster is another item that I like on him. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't really matter after that. You can get whatever items, Blood Razor, depending on what you're